Let's see. What do you say about Richard Wolff's claim that private enterprise destroyed commercial fishing by overfishing in the ocean, depleting fish populations because of profit motive? I mean, he's right in a sense, right? I don't think it's private enterprise, but he's right that if you don't think carefully about how to do fishing, if you don't figure out how to establish property rights over fishing, that is, expand the scope of property rights, expand the scope of private enterprise in the sense of defining property into the oceans, then you do run a real risk of overfishing, and it is true. In many areas, we have seen a significant overfishing because if the fish are not mine, and if everybody can fish in this location, I have an incentive to gather up as much fish as I can, because any fish that I don't gather up, my competitor is going to gather up, and it's very difficult to establish any kind of standard by which we leave the fisheries. We think long term, because who does the long term thinking? If I'm trying to do long term thinking, well, my competitor is going to be short term and he's going to gather up all the fish. So the only way to fix that ultimately is through figuring out a mechanism of private property, some kind of private property mechanism that defines private property over fish. And it's not easy to do, and I'm not claiming I have the answer to how to do it. But if you do a little bit of research online, you can find that Iceland and I think Norway have both figured out ways in which to maintain a free market in fish, that is to let commercial fishermen go out and fish, but not through quotas, but through a mechanism of property rights over fish, over fisheries, over fish areas, to get people to think long term and therefore not to overfish, and therefore to invest in the future and make sure that, and the fish stock in those places has increased dramatically. And you can see that everywhere. You can see that if you establish private property over wild animals that people value, then those wild animals don't go extinct. So the way to solve the problem of the extinction of elephants is to privatize the elephants. And now they're my elephants. And if the elephant have value, for example, for hunting, then I have an interest in maintaining the stock of elephants so that there's a certain percentage of them that can be hunted, every year. The same with lions, the same with other animals. And those experiments are being done today in Africa, in places like Kenya and Uganda, and I think in Tanzania, primarily in Kenya. And the results are astounding in terms of the growth in animals that people believed were going to be extinct not that long ago. It's not to criminalize all hunting, it's to privatize hunting. And if you privatize hunting and establish property rights properly, then you have the right kind of incentives to maintain the stock. And the same is true of fishing, the same is true of whales, the same is true of all these things. You have to, but in the oceans, you have to be very creative in terms of how you create property rights. And it's not obvious and it's not easy, and I don't have the answers necessarily, but that is the solution. That's how you go about doing it. And again, in Norway and in Iceland, they have solved the problem of fisheries by doing it that way.
All right. What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
How does objectivism differ from the philosophies that many of us have been exposed to in our youths? Philosophies based upon religions, theologians, dogmatists.
The very first difference, objectivism tells you that it is not right, it is not proper to man to take anything on faith. Religion is a matter of faith. You accept a religion emotionally or because you were born to it. You have not chosen it rationally. What objectivism will tell you is that reason, man's reason is his basic means of survival. That is the most important faculty which he has, and he has to guide his life and make his choices by means of his rational faculty. He has to make his own choices, but he has to know how to make them. It is immoral for him to act on his emotions, to be guided by the whim of the moment. That objectivism holds as very wrong, very immoral. And morality, in fact, consists of following your reason to the best of your ability. So that rationality is the basic virtue from which all the others proceed.
My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
Tell me this.